What do you do when overnight a global pandemic plunges the organization you lead into uncertainty? Welcome to The Pivot. Hi, everybody. Jen DeVore here, Civic Impact Manager for the Economy League of Greater Philadelphia. Welcome to The Pivot, our new web series highlighting innovative organizational pivots across the Greater Philadelphia region in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're excited to talk to civic leaders from across sectors. This series is supposed to be inspirational and collaborative so we can all get through these strange times together. I'm very excited to introduce my first guest, Malik Brown, Executive Director of the Graduate Philadelphia. Thank you so much, Malik. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, Jen. How are you?
I'm doing well as we can be in these times. This is an exciting opportunity to share these stories, and I really appreciate you being on the show. Before we get into the interview, let me just ask you first. This is something I ask all my guests. How are you doing? Just kind of personally through this situation.
So yeah, thanks so much for the question. I think we are all those of us who are still employed trying not to complain. I think you and I had probably talked about that offline. And so for me, I am grateful that I still have a job. I'm grateful that my children and my family are healthy. It is a bit of an adjustment, right? We've moved all of our programming online. My kids are home doing their classes on Zoom. You're teaching your 5-year-old how to stay present and engaged right on Zoom. So that's a bit difficult, but again, not complaining, just happy that we're healthy, we're safe, that we're still employed, and that we're still able to provide services to those who are most vulnerable.
Absolutely. And that's what we want to talk to you about today is how those services are expanding and evolving in these times. So why don't you start? Why don't you give us an overview of Graduate Philadelphia and the goals and the job to be done there?
Sure. So as you know, Graduate Philadelphia started in 2005. We had a visionary founder and executive director, Hadass Sheffer, who really saw a need to provide a pathway and a bridge for adults who had some post-secondary credit to go back to school, to get a degree, and to pursue greater economic mobility and security. Today, the graduate network is in 42 affiliates across the country due to the work of Hadass and the executive team at the network. And I stand on the shoulders of her and others who built Graduate Philadelphia since 2005. Right now, given the COVID-19 crisis, we've had to sort of migrate most of our programming and offerings online. Our college success advisors are still providing academic coaching, career guidance to students, but it's all done through phone, through text, through email, through Zoom, and is really providing us an extraordinary opportunity to help our adults really equip them with greater digital literacy, digital exploration tools in this new normal.
Yeah, so talk about the new normal. How specifically has COVID-19 affected your organization?
Sure. So as you know, Jen, Greater Philadelphia, it's a relationship-centric city, right? And so a lot of the programs, services, offers that a lot of nonprofits, higher education institutions do, it's through high touch, right? There's a high level of high touch frequency. And so for us, the opportunity to sit face to face with an adult who might be apprehensive about returning to college because they haven't been in 10, 15 years, sometimes that is a process. It could take up to 5, 6, 7 touches with that one individual to help them get over some of the barriers around financial literacy or some of the psychological barriers that prevent people from going back to school. And so talking to someone over Zoom or over the phone, really doesn't give you that kind of human connection that we're used to. However, we didn't want that to be a barrier to prevent us from still helping and serving adults, particularly at a time now that is critically important for people to reskill and upskill, right? And so we didn't want to sit back and wait for the recovery to happen. We wanted to get in front of it and make sure that people have what they need. Either it's a workforce credential or a bridge to a post-secondary credential during this time of economic crisis. And so I think the biggest challenge is that some of our students actually do not have internet connectivity at home and do not have the basic infrastructure like a laptop or a desktop. That is a barrier. And so what we've done is we've reached out to some of our employer partners. We've reached out to great organizations like Comcast, who's offering internet essentials, so that our lower to moderate income families can have the infrastructure and have the software needed to continue to live, work, and play in this new normal.
Yeah, I imagine that's a challenge that most are facing. You know, it's twofold, right? It's one thing to get everything online and to be virtual, and then it's, you know, the digital divide is just
That's
amplified
right.
in a situation like this. It sounds like you were able to put things together pretty quickly, especially the hardware and the internet access, which is incredible. I mean, one, I feel like that's hard to get in any situation. There's probably a shortage around that now too. I think of, you know, other organizations. I'm hoping to talk to somebody from the school district later on about how they're doing a similar kind of like digital scramble. But you were able to do that quickly. When did you first kind of suspect that things were going to start to spiral and that this was going to be becoming an issue? Like, when did you first start to realize like something's happening on a global level and we're going to have to start adapting?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I think, again, we have really, really good leadership. So our founder and national president, Hadass, sort of started to see some early indicators, probably about 2 weeks prior to the order that came from the city. And so we because we're a national organization, we saw some indicators that were happening across the country. We had some local partners here, like PHMC and other larger institutions like JEVS, who began to kind of see this, coming. And so just through partnership with local organizations, partnerships through some of our national organizations that we partner with, we started to say, hey, let's get a plan in place just in case we have to move our offerings and our programs online. And I also will say that we have a really strong corporate governance structure, a strong board. And so during a board meeting that took place back in February, this actually was a topic that came up at our board meeting. And we were asked to make sure that we had a plan and a contingency plan in place to ensure that there was still business continuity if something like this happened. And that we can still continue to serve our adults. So I would thank the local partners, our national partners, our board, who are really ahead of the curve and started to put plans in place for us to thrive, to survive, and continue to grow during this crisis.
Yeah, no, the national indicators is interesting, and it's made me realize that my first two guests, you know, it's you, and then I've also interviewed Ivy Olish from Playworks,
yes.
Which is another national affiliate organization. And so having that insight from the country perspective is interesting. I'm curious to see what the timeline difference is between our organizations that have a national presence versus ones that are local or hyper local in the neighborhood. So that's just a note for myself and our viewers at home to kind of start to pay attention to that timeline difference.
I would also say, Jen, just in the spirit of this casual conversation, I mean, those who follow CNBC or who read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, there is sort of a 2 or 3 week sort of lag between some of the early indicators that sort of our financial markets show and sort of when the actual sort of crisis hit. So if you kind of rewind 3-4 weeks ago, if you're really paying attention, you kind of saw some volatility in the financial markets, and that kind of really spoke to some of the anxiety that, you know, some of those analysts who do more forecasts saw. And so again, you would have to be really paying attention because it really wasn't something that was, you know, flashing across your screen. But I would encourage our guests to really kind of pay attention to what's happening in the financial markets, because they are, you know, sometimes 2 to 3 months ahead of where the general public is.
That's a great reminder, right? So think globally, act locally, right? When you're paying attention to this stuff, that's great. So talk to me about how you've pivoted, how you've changed your goals, what solutions. I mean, obviously there's getting everybody set up and online, but where do you go from there once you're live with the new plan?
Sure. So one of the pivots, as we'd already discussed, is just making sure that our students know that we're here for them, making sure that they know that that we'll continue to provide services and that we can be a voice for them, a voice to the city, a voice to employers, a voice to our college partners, and just be an advocate and champion for some of their basic needs. And so, you know, one of the things that we did in our pivot was we did an anecdotal survey where we reached out to our adult students just to assess and survey their pain points, some of their barriers, some of their challenges. And there were three things that sort of rose to the top, if you will, in terms of three kind of key themes. One was that there was a lack of internet connectivity and hardware at home. Number two, there was a concern about food insecurity. And number three, there was a concern about rent, mortgage, utility assistance. I would say those are the three things that we continue to hear in terms of pain points from our adults. And so what we did was we immediately reached out to some of our nonprofit friends in Philadelphia who provide food services, who provide rent, mortgage, utility assistance, and just created greater bridges with some of those organizations. So we reached out to Share Food, we reached out to Fill Abundance, we reached out to great organizations like Achievability and Diversified Community Services, just to make them aware that here are some of the concerns that our adults are facing and what can we do to bridge that gap, so that part of the recovery, as you know, is public health, basic needs, you know, food, shelter, et cetera. And then part of the recovery will be education and workforce services, right? And so we wanted to make sure that we merged those two right away. The other thing that we did in our pivot, and you and I sort of talked about this offline, is the idea that Graduate Philadelphia serves as sort of a population index, right? So many of our adults, they sort of have a sort of annual living salary of about $30,000 to $40,000 a year. In most cases with at least 2 or 3 children in the household, right? Many of these adults have some post-secondary credit, but have never completed an associate's or a bachelor's, right? And so we know that if you're making about $35,000, you have 2 or 3 kids in the household, you're furloughed from your current employer, we're doing everything we can to ensure that this particular profile of a Philadelphian, that they don't fall through the cracks, right? Because they're already sort of a sort of a level or two above the poverty line. And in many cases, they don't have $500 to $1,000 in savings, right? So this crisis is really going to hit people in a really, really hard way. And we just wanted to make sure that we have the partnerships in place to provide those basic needs as we kind of go through the crisis and as the economy recovers.
Yeah, and you started the interview earlier talking about the network and the importance of connections in the region, and this is really the time to activate that and test that civic muscle that we've been building over the years. Now's the time to put that into play. And I think the population index is such a smart idea. Do you foresee that happening, or that relationship and that that resource progressing and evolving and kind of becoming part of your long-term goal in the city to provide that information?
That's a great question, Jen. Thank you. So yes, we really want to put some more muscle and some more data analytics behind this idea of a population index. And so if you think again back to my earlier comment about financial markets, right? We know that if you're following sort of the Dow Jones, if you're following the S&P 500, if you're following the NASDAQ composite, these are all indices or indexes of sort of the overall health of corporate America, financial markets, right? So we can kind of take that same idea and do a population index and really kind of look at the population that we serve, right? Again, you know, families that sort of make between $30,000 and $40,000 a year, families that have 2 or 3 kids in the household, families that have some post-secondary education but have never completed a degree. That really, you know, we can really do some great, I think analytics around that and really share that data with the city of Philadelphia, share that data with our employer partners, share that data with our higher education partners, so that they then can provide the kind of solutions and wraparound services that are needed for these families to get through this crisis. And again, we were going in the right direction as a city, you know, being connected to so many great institutions in greater Philadelphia, that the city was moving in the right direction. as it relates to economic mobility, as it relates to reducing our poverty rate. And with this crisis, I am hoping that we don't go backwards, right? And I'm hoping that through the civic muscle that you mentioned earlier and through partnerships, that we can keep the momentum going that we had over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it sounds like now Graduate Philadelphia, already a fantastic resource, will evolve to an even better one. And this pivot, this one particular pivot, is permanent. It seems like this is something, you know, that you'll continue to offer, which I think is great. This is what we're trying to showcase, that, you know, you have to be smart and savvy and quick, but then also still think about the long-term goals. And at the end, what is the job to be done, and is it still being done? And it certainly sounds like it's happening here. So great work. I mean, this is exciting stuff. These are really hard times, but to hear about all the good work that good people are doing across the city is fantastic. So let me ask you this: how can people that are watching this at home, how can they help Graduate fulfill their mission?
Sure. So one, please go to our website. You can simply
Which
Google
will show you,
which will show you, right? Also, I think that we all have sort of a network of family, of friends, of those that we serve within our churches, our nonprofit organizations. We all know someone who may have stopped out of college for any number of reasons: health reasons, childcare, transportation, affordability. You know, we're asking, reach out to those individuals, share, you know, the Graduate Philadelphia program, give them our number, our website, and we'll be happy to help those individuals sort of navigate this new normal of an accelerated digital economy, where we believe that some kind of post-secondary credential is going to be even more critical in today's landscape. So, you know, tap into your network, reach out to me personally. You know, my mobile is 215-280-3225. I will be happy to partner with your organization if you offer basic needs. And also, if you offer any sort of kind of workforce credential, we want to make sure that we create a bridge between our academic partners and our workforce practitioners, whereby there are more stackable credentials that people can kind of come through a funnel. And if they start, let's say, at a workforce provider that offers a workforce credential, that's stackable to an associate's or a bachelor's degree. And so we really want to be that nexus between the workforce development community and the higher education community. And the one last thing that I would like to add, Jen, is that one of the other things that we pivoted is recognizing the enormous interconnection between public health and education, right? And, you know, one of our partners, PHMC, has done such a great job in the region regarding public health. And if you're involved in that space, you know that one of the social determinants of health is education and a living wage job, right? Those are two social determinants of health. Yep. And so I think this crisis has certainly put a spotlight on some of the inequities related to health. And I think that part of the pivot that we've done is how can we partner stronger with organizations that provide, you know, healthcare services, so that if you have, you know, strong educational credentials, if you have a living wage job, that will increase your likelihood of having stronger emotional health, psychological health, and mental health. And so that's one of the other things that we're doing in this new normal.
Yeah, and it's all connected, right? I mean, I think that's a fantastic takeaway. What's your piece of advice for someone that's watching this to get inspiration as they are trying to figure out their own pivot? Just one quick piece to share.
Yeah, I would say that we're all anxious, right? We all have some angst, right, about you know, COVID-19 and the safety and health of our families, our friends, those we serve. But I would say that we have to be bold, we have to be aggressive, we have to be creative, and we have to be adaptable. And I would say create a plan, you know, jump in, and begin to reach out to partners, you know, in the nonprofit sector, in the business sector, you know, your local public officials. We're all in this together, and the best thing that we can do is reach out, build partnerships, and be adaptable. Because what I have told some of my nonprofit colleagues is that we're not going back, right? There is no going back, right? We are now in the new normal is the new normal, if that's a quote, right? Yeah. And so how do we kind of create the kind of nimble and agile organizations that will not only help us get through this crisis, but will help your organizations get through the next crisis, right? Because these kind of pandemics, due to global climate change, due to other environmental factors, they will continue to happen. And so we might as well now, construct our organizations to kind of be more nimble so that you can be ahead of the next potential pandemic.
Absolutely. Wow. And it's even wild to think about, this happening again. But as you said, we have to move forward, and this is the new normal. And, we have to continue to think about those indicators and how to be prepared. So thank you so much, Malik. I appreciate you being on the show. I'm going to share your information with everybody. But thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. So
thank
that's Malik Brown. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jen. I just want to say thank you for your leadership. I had a chance to meet you when I was at Diversified Community Services. We partnered when you were at Campus Philly, and I love the fact that you're at the Economy League now, just doing such great work. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for the opportunity to share, a few words with you today.
No, it's great that, we can, remain connected through all the many lives that we've lived throughout our careers. And it's great to see the work that you're doing and to look to you and others for leadership in these times. So thank you.
Thank you.
So that's Malik Brown, Executive Director of Graduate Philadelphia. You can find them at graduatephiladelphia.org. And then on Twitter and Facebook. You are watching The Pivot. I'm your host, Jen DeVore, Civic Impact Manager at the Economy League of Philadelphia. If you have a pivot of your own or know someone who does, please contact us. Our email is pivot@economyleague.org. You can also tweet us or find us on the web. And thank you so much. We will see you on the next show.